Okay. Beating out of my chest. Welcome everyone to the Listen Carefully podcast. I am so delighted to introduce our guests today. This has been in the works and I'm so excited to have Brittney and Andrea here. And we're just going to unpack all things relationship and just all the layers and levels and ways that we've learned and been conditioned to show up and how that impacts our life and how we create what we do in our heads versus like how it translates into the world and impacts how we show up. Because I feel like relationship with others is like the goal because that's like our human need, but then I feel like there has to be some level of like safety and connection with self too. And I feel as though that isn't always nurtured or taught because no fault of their own, but our parents, our caregivers, maybe they weren't taught either. So now is the time where, there's no more hiding and we kind of have to face ourselves. So I'm so glad to have you guys here and yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here. And I just want to say to you that we have been talking about you so much of just like the mad respect we have for you and posting so consistently and authentically. And we were talking to each other about just how we knew starting a business and being visible in the world is vulnerable, but we really didn't understand just how vulnerable it was until we started doing it. And that's when we just started having more and more respect for you. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's huge. It takes so much courage and we just really admire you and what you've been doing.
That is so sweet. I feel so mutual. The feeling is so mutual because it's like, oh my gosh, we can't be walking this path alone. And we all are navigating our own like things. Like when I hear you say that, what I think of is like, I just spent the last 4 years living with Chris and we got to be, really great friends and just moving out, how that has changed our relationship. Not that we care about each other or love each other any less, but it's definitely like personally, I feel like that's given me that time to nurture and develop, and like how you're describing that courage, like having that space to tap in of like, okay, like here we are, there's so much more like time now that like you have with yourself, like let's get to know yourself, it's just like so powerful because like I feel the same with y'all. Like I see how you're showing up in relationship and how that's so courageous and vulnerable and like meeting each other exactly where you are and that being safe and that being okay. And like I feel like, there's often like this part in relationship where it's like, at least the way I was raised, like we would rather be right than to like be in relationship. Like protecting that pride was so valuable. And like it gives me that visual of like the white knuckling of like, I'm gonna hold on to this forever, and I'm never gonna like forgive you or let this little thing go. But really, as we've done the work and continue to, as we face new levels, there's always going to be those triggers that arise like at every new level. We just get to know our tells and we get to know our patterns even more. But yeah, like coming to that realization, I've realized, wait a minute, like this is not about any of those things. It's always comes back to my relationship to myself and how the world's impacted me on, every level. And I've been leaning into like the mother wound recently because, I feel like I've got daddy issues, but I also have like big triggers around like mom and how, mom is our deepest, first, most intimate, everything connection. And then what happens, it can be really confusing. And I know like people might say, well, I love it's like, it doesn't take any of that away, right? It's like, we still love our family. We appreciate them. it has less to do with them. And again, coming back to self of like, this is how I was impacted, you know? And I think the reason that people are afraid to turn it inward is because we've been so conditioned to have our external meet our needs and have, you know, everything that we need. There's this perception that it's outside of us. Like, let's chase the job, let's chase the relationship, let's chase the career. And then we'll be promised like this fulfilling, I don't know, connection to self. Is that the idea? Like that once we get there, once we arrive, then we can rest. But then we're like anxious and we can't rest anyway.
That's like the story of my life. So you need to heal completely and then I can relax.
Yeah. First of all, it's like not possible to
Yeah.
heal completely, or it's like, that's not even a thing. So, but we place
Mhm.
we have these ideas about what the end goal should be, instead of just being like, the whole thing is a journey. There actually is no end goal until we die. So like, we're always going to be in these like ever deepening processes with any of our wounds or any of like our triggers, that it's like that spiral path. Like, we're going to loop back around and learn the lesson in a deeper way, in a different way, come at it from a different angle. So, and there's just so much beauty in that it's an ongoing process that we always get to be in.
Yeah, and I'm learning how to get more comfortable being in that process. And it's interesting too. What I've noticed is that it's like, it's not only is it like you revisit these same wounds and triggers in like, you know, in a deepening way. What I've been discovering is like, I'm revisiting the same wounds within all my different types of relationships in the world, of like all these like wounds,
Like
and
how they show up differently in different types of
yeah,
relationships.
you know, you're talking about the mother wound. I have been looking at mine a lot lately too, and that would especially come up in the beginning of our relationship. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, like we spent so much time working through all these like wounds and triggers in our relationship. We got to a certain level of like safety and learning how to like navigate that together. And then I just started like, and like, for example, setting boundaries was really hard for me with Brittney at the beginning of our relationship. And then I noticed that like I started doing this work with my family, and the same boundary triggers that would come up with Brittney, then I had to learn that within my relationship with my family. Then when I was nannying these children, learning that boundary work with these children, and oh my God,
It's always a fun one.
yeah. And then like boundaries, and like I started exploring boundaries in relationship to the universe and work and money, and like what are my boundaries in that, and just like,
Yeah, what am I willing to do and not willing to do in these different aspects of my life?
yeah, and all the fears that come up when we do set boundaries, and the consequences you have to be willing to experience. So yeah, I'm noticing how, yeah, these same wounds get triggered in all these different relationships, and it's an opportunity to integrate these parts of ourselves and do the healing on our inner children. And yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like if it's hard to like navigate those areas within yourself, it not that it would be like a distraction, but I just imagine like how the rest of the world is operating, maybe from like this less conscious place of like, you know, feeling like it really is about the other person, or it really is about the job, or it really is about like the money. It's like there can be so much clarity and also so much heartache when you realize like, wait a minute, I am the one who's the conductor. You know, like,
Absolutely.
it's like still to this day, like so much easier to be like, well, if only they were different, like I
Yeah.
good. I wouldn't have to look at this, you know, if only my relationship with my parents was like so good, then like I wouldn't be challenged in this way. But like, how do we really even know, you know? And like, it's just fascinating to me because, you know, like we're in this mode of like, okay, let's heal everything, but not from a place of like I have to heal it to feel good, but just like, I want to like know myself deeper. I want to be on that new level, because it's not like better or worse or good or bad. It's just like that. I feel like it's that soul knowing of like, wait a minute, this is part of the puzzle of why I'm here. And none of this is real, but like it all is real. And like, do we want to like go to the next level or just like wait till next lifetime? Like, okay, we can decide tomorrow, we don't have to decide today, but it's just fascinating to me. Like, I do find like so much of that like desire to grow in that way, because for me, I'm like, well, why not? Like, why not? Like, I've always, as a kid, I would always look around at different adults, and like the messaging was like adults have the answers, but then like it just always felt really incongruent when I would see adults choosing to either be stuck in their ways or having their own blocks or hiccups or whatever, and it's just like, wow, how do I fit into all of this? What does this mean for me? Because like we know that relationships are the greatest source of learning, and that we can't be brought into this world alone. It takes all of us to get here. And yeah, but like I feel like there is a big gap, or there is like a big piece missing in the dialogue or just in the conversation about, it's almost like, oh yeah, we need each other. So then as in a way, it's like, well, if that's like our default, then we're never really like magnetizing the maximum. I don't know. Like, do you guys feel that sometimes, like where it's like you just feel like you're so in it, but then you're like, well, why? Like, is there another way? I don't know how to put words to that.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I love what you're saying. It like reminds me though of these experiences are like opportunities to like also just sit, like what you're saying of like, it's not better or worse. It's just like there are opportunities to sit with these parts of ourselves. And it's interesting of like, the more I do that and stop trying to get to a destination, it's like the more I don't need a destination. If I can just like within a triggering situation or my wounds coming up, if I can just turn inward and really be present with my inner child and these parts of myself that are only here right now in this situation because they need love and attention, it feels so good. Like I don't need to be anywhere else. Like I don't know. It's like I'm giving myself that love that I never received as a child. And then I don't need to get to any sort of destination. It like allows me to be so present in that. So for me, that's what it's all about. And that's what helps me.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, it's just making me think of like, I think I have a lot more resistance than you to like hard things coming up and different experiences. Like I have so much resistance. And so, and like I have resistance to even certain parts being triggered. I'm like, this part is really hard for me to be with. So I'm like, my work then is to learn to be present with, that triggered part that's coming up of like recently, for example, it's been like this part that really cares what people think and is terrified of being judged or rejected or like ridiculed, like terrified of these things. And so it's like learning, and then I have so much resistance to being with that part. So I'm simultaneously like learning to be with that part that's scared of all these judgments of other people. And then I'm also learning to be with like the part of me that's resistant to being with that part. It's like that part's is a protective part that's trying to keep me safe from feeling this really intense emotion and this intensity of caring so deeply what other people think. And then there's like shame parts that it's like, there's just so many different pieces that come in when we kind of open ourselves up to seeing it and approaching these intense, uncomfortable experiences and emotions with curiosity, like, there's a lot here I'm noticing, and like, how can I kind of unpack this a little bit? Yeah. And just something that I've learned recently in therapy is just how to kind of like, I always have so many different parts coming up. They all want to be heard. And it's kind of like allowing them all to have a voice and space, but also kind of setting a boundary within myself of like, my nervous system can only handle so much. So I want to hear what all of you, it's kind of what I would do with children of like, I want to hear what everyone has to say, but when you're all talking at once, I feel so overwhelmed and I can't listen. So I need us to go one at a time.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how like my background working with young children informs then how, and my relationships with young children have really taught me how to be with my own inner children. It's just so cool. Those like that reciprocal, yeah, I don't know.
No, yeah, this like work with children is literally everything, because what it comes down to is our relationship with ourselves and our own inner children. And it's crazy. And I'm so grateful that we both have this background with children too, that it informs all of our other work in relationship and other types of relationship. It's everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's reminding me of like that our like attention is our greatest currency. Like people will say like your energy is your greatest currency, and it's tying back into what you said, Andrea, earlier of like there's nowhere else you'd rather be, like this is it, this is the love, and the love is infinite and abundant and all around us. And like how do we tap into that and like feel our heart? How do we even like notice that? And I feel like with our attention being our greatest currency, it's like that can also be that reminder, like how you said, Brittney, with the boundaries, right? Of like, okay, where is my energy leaking? Like, how much can my nervous system actually hold? Like, am I even interested in like increasing my capacity right now? Or is this like not the way, and like giving that, basically, I think what it boils down to is like the communication style, like being so clear. It's like really impossible to like be too communicative or like too clear.
Mm-hmm.
And like just also thinking of like young children, it's that reminder of, oh, if we're not so clear with ourselves, like how is it then possible to convey, communicate, show, share, like with the young people in our lives that we really do want them to have that foundation too. And being that example, being that model, being the ones that are brave enough to go first, right? Okay, like I'm diving into my stuff. Like that is vulnerable. I just want to say, like, not everyone is doing this. Like, not everyone plans to even ever look at this. Like, that is world shattering stuff. Like this is revolutionary.
Yeah, no,
Love it.
totally. Yeah. And I love that you're bringing in communication. Communication is everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been on such a journey learning to communicate with each other. And it's like we've kind of vacillated between like really unconscious communication and then like super overly conscious to the point of being like almost fake.
Yeah,
or
it's like not even authentic. It's like we're trying
like,
to
oh, this
like,
is the script I'm supposed to say. And like I've done this with my work with children too. I'm like, okay, this is the script. And then the kids are like, what?
You're not being authentic.
Yeah. And then they're like, you're incongruent. I'm going to push on this more. So we've been in such a process of that and kind of come to this like middle ground of like, how can we like know each other's like communication styles and needs around different things and what's sensitive for each of us, and be mindful of that without going too far in this direction of this isn't authentic and true to me. So it's like kind of
self-censoring and
yeah. And then and just like almost like trying too hard to the point of like, for me at least, like I could like dissociate, or I'm just so in my head that I'm not present in the moment. Like,
and it gets in the way of our connection when we're trying to
Mhm.
be too conscious and what's the nonviolent communication script for this, and like how do we be good therapists in a like relationship, you know? It's just
yeah,
it actually, it's so funny because it's just like
it can get in the way of
it
our
gets in the way of the actual
connection.
connection,
Yeah.
when actually what sometimes is more connecting is just being real, like you pissed me off. Like, you know, but then also not veering so much into the direction of unconscious hurtful speech
Yeah, and reactivity and
yeah, so we've like
such a balancing act.
yeah, over the years we've, you know, and we're still working on it always, but finding that balance of like mindful yet fully authentic way of communicating with each other.
And then yeah, learning it in our relationship is one thing, and then like what you were saying of like then communicating to family members like
Mhm.
in a similar way is a whole different like area that we have to learn this and practice this in.
Yeah. Yeah, and that might look different with them and how we yeah.
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 Like, like just really trusting, like anchoring into that trust that you have, that like you're trusting your truth so much, like even if no one else gets it, even if no one else believes you, even if you know, whatever, like rejection, humiliation, embarrassment, like you're trusting yourself so much that like you're moving through your fear anyways, and like it's almost like that's what's going to give you the practice of like needing to like the goal being authentic, right? Or the goal being a little bit more authentic. Like it's almost like, yeah, like the moving through the fear is the ticket for getting to that place where, yeah, like the safety too, where it's like, is this safe enough to bring to my family yet? Or like maybe this isn't the right timing, or maybe like I need to get more solid in myself before I know how to communicate that. Like not giving yourself too much pressure either, because we're all human, even with like our, you know, roles and our titles and our, you know, it's like we're still just human,
Yeah.
and we're here to grow and learn and be like, just to be able to learn something. You know, I feel like with my work with kids, like I feel like such a beginner in that way, where it's like I feel like I learn so much from them, and that oftentimes like will surprise kids and surprise parents, of like just that ability to like get on their level, or just that ability to have that like I'm thinking of the Fool, like the beginner's mind. It's like can we be so present, or like maybe our triggers are really loud that day or that moment, and like yeah, knowing that we can trust the people we're in relationship with, the people that we care about, the relationships that do tend to those needs. And yeah, I feel like at least the biggest thing that I see with kids too is like how to support them and help them when they're coming to realize that like their external cannot meet all of their needs. I feel like that's so deep and so big, and can also feel like really existential, like on a soul level, you know. It also comes up with the enoughness, right? It's like this ties into every area. It's like my mom's giving me everything she has, and it's never enough. You know, it's like the giving tree. It's like the boy comes back, gets what he needs, and then the tree suddenly is a stump and realizes, oh my gosh, I have nothing left to give you. You know, like, did I give myself what I needed too, so we could both get what we needed? Or, you know, there's so many layers to that, but just like the enoughness when it comes to children feels so big. And like that's always what felt big for me too. Like no wonder I'm seeing kids that are needing help to move through that too.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, I don't know, the biggest thing that you've taught me, Brittany, around children though is like the biggest gift we can give is our own authenticity and our own modeling of boundaries and everything. And like yeah, I don't know if you want to share a little about that with your experience with children.
Yeah, I mean, Jen, as you were talking, I was just thinking about Well, first of all, I was just thinking about how it's kind of a universal grief that we all carry, that we can't get all our needs met externally. And especially as in childhood, like we probably aren't going, none of us are probably going to get all our needs met by our caregivers. And so just normalizing that, and normalizing that for caregivers too, that I think we place such pressure on caregivers to be everything and give everything to kids, when, like you're saying, then it's like overextending yourself to this point that it doesn't serve you or your relationship with your child. And it actually is kinder to yourself and to your child to kind of own that like, this is what I need right now. And I see that you're really needing my attention, and I need 5 minutes of alone time and quiet. I need to regulate. Like, modeling that, I think, is such a gift that we can give to kids and to ourselves, of just being honest about what we're able to do in any relationship at every moment, being clear and honest about that. And I think it's so hard, because it's so hard not to think back of when we were kids and we didn't get all our needs met, and how hard that was. And we don't want other people to experience that pain. Yeah, it's just so deep on so many different levels. Yes.
No, I love everything that you're saying. And I just want to add one thing related to what Jen was saying about the communication piece being everything, because like, I love what you're saying about that. And we're never going to get all of our needs met, and that modeling piece from these caregivers and the pressure. And at the same time, I think there's so much power when caregivers speak from I language and like ownership and self-responsibility for their needs and their experience of like, versus like, you are too needy. Like, that's what I got growing up from my mom. It was, she had such a hard time handling my need for attention. And I always wanted her attention, and she worked a lot and had her own need. And it was like, anytime I expressed that need, it was very much just, you're too needy, and all her anger, and she would attack me about that. And there's I actually don't think there's anything wrong with her desire to work, her desire to talk to her friends on the phone, whatever needs that she had. But if she would have just simply switched her communication style to, I love you, I know you want my attention. Right now, I need to work. Right now, I need to make this phone call, but I love you so much. I'll give you attention when I can. Like, just something even like that would have made such a huge difference for me growing up.
So you don't then internalize that there's something wrong with me. My
Exactly.
desire is wrong. My desire for attention is wrong. It's not about you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like not internalizing the pain of our caregivers or their lack of communication, awareness, that their own windows of tolerance to be able to handle like what we needed to be communicated.
Yeah.
So rich, because like, let's face it, like being born into a body, the like trauma of being human, like there are some intense needs required and involved. Like coming into this world, I'm sure like a little being brand new, it's like, oh my gosh, it's an overwhelming experience, and like holding all of the realities to be true, like how you said, right? It's like your mom doesn't have to change who she is, but like just let me know who you are. I want to know who you are. I want to know who I am, and I feel like this reminds me too of attachment styles and how we attach to our caregivers based on what our environment was like and what they were like. And yeah, it's all so rich, because I resonate with that deeply too, of like, do I just have more needs than the rest of everyone else? it must be so special that I'm different, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
no, this
special.
like your needs are like, that's how I don't know if you feel similarly, but I grew up, with this message that like it's never enough. Like it'll never, all my attention will never be enough for you.
It's exactly.
And I believed that for a long time. I thought that I like had this insatiable amount of need for attention.
Yes.
And I just don't think it's true. Okay, go ahead. Yes. Brittney.
I will speak to your need for attention.
Go ahead.
I'm very
familiar with
very
it.
familiar with this. Well, it's like the need was actually for presence.
Yeah.
It was this quality of attention that it wasn't insatiable because you never received the quality of presence. And it's like, even that's what happens in our relationship of like, when I'm distracted and I'm not present, you're like, I need attention. And I'm like, when I can be aware enough to be like, I'm not able to give you this. I know the type of attention you want, and it's this deep attuned presence.
Yeah.
And I know myself, and I know I'm not able to give you that until I, send these emails, do this thing like ABC, and then I'll circle back and then I can give you this attention. When I can be that aware that I can then communicate that to you, then you're soothed, and when I follow through and you get that attention of like that deep attuned attention, which is so what kids want. They don't need, they actually don't have a need for like just all the time, 100% presence. They don't even want that. They don't want attention all the time. They just want this attunement and this deep presence in, even small doses is enough to meet that need. It's just, we're busy all the time. Parents are often distracted on their phones, or like, even as a teacher, I felt that way of like, I'm distracted. I have a lot on my plate. Like, I can't fully be present right now. And I know that's why my class is like going nuts right now, because I can't fully be here. And giving ourselves some like compassion it's really hard to always be able to give that to our partners or our children or anyone in our lives. But that's often what the need is. And when we can slow down to do that, it's like the need gets met. It is satiated.
Like it takes, I'm telling you, it takes 30 seconds. That's all I need. If Brittney gives me just 30 seconds of like right in my face, eye contact, like beaming me love and attention and actual presence, I'm completely satiated. I'm like, all right, you can go do your thing now. I'm good. But I grew up for so long thinking that need would never be satiated, and it's just not true. It's like what you were saying of like, the quality of attention that I would get from my mom there was never that presence. It was like, okay, we can spend time together, but we're gonna go see a movie where we're not talking at all, and like so then I was confused. We would get home from the movie, and I would communicate. As a child, I didn't even know how to communicate it, but it was like, okay, I still need more time with you, or that wasn't enough. And she's like, what are you talking about? We just spent 3 hours together. So I really like internalized that it's just like, it's insatiable, this need. And I've discovered that that's not true. And I think you're right. It's the same thing with children. It's like, we think that they need hours and hours of our like undivided attention, and it's not true. It's just like a certain quality in short spurts. Like,
yeah. And kids know when we're distracted or not. Like, I don't know if you've ever spent time with a baby and they're crying and you're trying to get them to stop, and you're like rocking them and doing all the things, but you're thinking about other things. They know you're thinking about other things and they're not soothed. They know. And then as soon as you're like, okay, I'm going to drop in, look you in the eye, I'm here with you. Like, then they have the ability to be soothed. Because we're actually in the room with them. Otherwise, it's like, that's what they need, is for us to be in the room with them. And it's the same presence that our own inner children need too. Like, that's the quality that we need to give to ourselves. Can be even harder to access and to do for ourselves. Like, for me, at least, it's so easy to distract and let your to-do list get in the way, or just anything get in the way. social media, like all the things. And if we can just give ourselves that attuned presence in our different parts, a little goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that's like where our sensitivity is like are our superpowers in that way. Like we get to be sensitive and that gets to be amazing versus this thing of like, I'm wrong or I'm different or whatever. And like that also shows us too, like where our parents exactly didn't get their childhood needs met either, you know, and whether they're a little more repressed versus like sensitive. Like I know I just spent the weekend with my parents a few weeks ago and like it's all of their inner child stuff, but it's just a little less accessible, you know, but like if they spend a little more of that time and attention, I'm sure it could be tapped into because it also reminds me of how like there's this phenomenon of like healing versus like coping and how it's exactly like how you said, like the healing doesn't have to take this long, long while time, but like when it's precise and when it's accurate and when it's spot on, it's like that can be all we need, you know, like it's like the light bulb moment or like the, oh, that's what it is, like the coming into that realization or receiving that download or having that space to integrate or you know because it also just like makes you think like I think about that too. My mom was that way too and my dad too, but like yeah, like let's go to like a sports game, that'll be the quality time. And I don't even watch the game, I'm just like people watching because that's like what I did. And it was just interesting because it's like, oh, like, are their needs just different or are they repressed? You know, like it just makes me wonder how numb they are or if they really do have different needs in different ways. So, yeah, it's fascinating. It feels so unlimited to tap into. And again, it's like that piece of, oh, like this isn't about them not knowing, you know, or this is about me and I get to like claim that responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, I don't know, I'm curious to know how you feel, Jen, but for me, I think something that feels so hard is that like my parents and I were so different of like my biggest passion, what I live for is
Mhm.
healing work and trauma work and this inner child work and looking at my childhood and like all of it in a spiritual context. And this work is my entire life, all
Mhm.
day, every day. Like I love it. And then to not like them not being on even somewhat of a similar wavelength or they don't value that at all. They don't touch that. It's so hard to connect when we have such different values and um
Well, and it's a kind of a values clash too. It's
yeah.
not just that like, oh, we like different things. It's that your value, it brings things up for them and it's
Yeah,
hard for
their
them.
value is to suppress those things, to not look at them. It's very difficult for them. They don't want to. And yeah, so then finding that point of connection for me honestly becomes impossible because then there's no way for me to show up authentically and for
Mhm.
them to show up authentically and for there to be some level of compatibility there. And then to like, come to this place of like, yeah, I'm really incompatible with my family, with my parents. It's heartbreaking, and that's something that I'm really working through right now. And I'm specifically working on my like grief and anger around it. Historically, anger has been really difficult for me to access because I really do have a lot of compassion for my family and what they've been through and why they are the way they are. And um yeah, and I have a really hard time with anger, and I think it's not spiritual, and especially I can't communicate my anger towards them to them. So that's something I've been like really playing with, is like examining this belief I have that anger is not spiritual when actually it's fucking sacred, and I'm
Mhm.
learning to really embody that anger and to express that. And it's really hard for me. So that's an edge I'm working with.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And wow, to like the evolution of your soul for leaning in, because it's like there's so many levels and waves and parts and pieces. And obviously the most complicated, complex is our family system, right? It's like to come to that arrival of acceptance may happen more than once. And even so, even though we are, our family's greatest trigger, that doesn't always mean that like we're going to trigger them to see us more, right? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not going to be seen the way that we want to be.
Yeah.
And like even though we're the biggest trigger, so like I related to what you shared, and especially with like consumption. I feel like whether that's like shopping or the way addiction shows up in my family, whether it's like screens or alcohol or work or
Mm.
for me it's food. Like food provided so much comfort for me and still does. And like also for the first time in my life, I'm really getting to the bottom of like what nourishes me. And sometimes I'll go through waves where it's like food's never enough because that's what I'm working through, or shedding more layers of like not enoughness, because like I'll just open the fridge and I'll be like, yep, nothing's gonna satisfy me. But really it's like now I'm learning like, okay, like let's get to the actual roots of everything. Like let's start growing your own sprouts. Let's start like at the bottom, because I mean, growing up, I don't know if you know this about me, but we always went out to eat. Like that was the thing. Like there was no like connection and physical like interaction with like the food that you eat, like I mean we blessed the food, but like that was what we did, um and I feel like right now I'm part of my awakening is coming into this whole new level of like nourishment, like true nourishment. Like I'm getting what I need and um figuring it out, and not having that pressure to like have it all figured out, but knowing that I'm like on the way to getting it figured out or getting it sorted or learning more or diving deeper. It's like it's even with like the healing journey or the health journey, it's like there are so many rabbit holes, and like just all of the things, the way that all the things are, and so I feel like taking that responsibility too, the way that that's manifested through food has like felt super, super empowering for myself. On top of it feeling so nourishing because I get to be in charge of that, like it was always like, oh, I was never taught. And it's like, right, but now you get to teach yourself. Oh my gosh. And while that is so overwhelming and again, like so much easier to be like, well, if I was taught this, I wouldn't have this. It's like, no, but like you having this is part of your journey and part of your story, and like why it's going to mean so much more when you find these things out. Because every time I learn something new, I'm like, why didn't I know this? But now not from this place of like, oh my God, I was deprived, but now from this place of like, life gets to be so exciting today because I know this new thing.
Mm. Totally.
So it's been a journey for me too, because I know that like deep down, my family supports me and they cheer for me, but it's never going to look in the way that I like specifically want it. And that's okay. That's the part that's like the harsh acceptance of like,
Yeah.
because I can remember too, like when my grandpa died back in February of 2021, we had such a special connection and he's been in my life my whole life. And definitely a father figure for me, and having that feminine side to him, and just I mean like so much that words can't really put words to. But I was grieving so hard and I was crying so hard, and even just having that sense of like, why am I the only one that's like in touch this way? It's not that like their style or way of grief is different, but that was when it was illuminated for me that like, oh, like I don't know how to connect with them in this, even though they're really, really different. Like, how do I not feel alone in this, even though like we're supposed to be grieving together, or, whatever expectations we have or assumptions that we wish. It's like, that was for me a big moment where I was like, oh, this is really different for them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's like, it just like brings me back to just like the gift this is the way I view it. and I know all of us here do, the gift of feeling deeply, whatever emotion it is, the whole spectrum of human emotion, like the three of us, like we value feeling in general, and it's not always easy, but it's a beautiful way of life to walk the earth feeling deeply. And yeah, I think that way of life is very scary for a lot of people. And in some ways it's easier to, kind of numb yourself from that. And in some ways it's really hard, because when you numb yourself to these difficult emotions, you numb yourself to all the other emotions, and you go through life numb. And
Yeah.
it's sad and it's hard. And yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the biggest lesson in that too, I'm thinking of the four agreements and the fifth agreement, like just that commitment to self, but also like, whatever they're not willing to accept or know or whatever, it's like, that's okay, because I also think
Yeah.
about like when I use words like trauma, or when I use words like that, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not even allowed to like use those words around you, like I think it was when they were here, and I said something like, you know what, like I for sure had religious trauma, and then it was like this whole thing of like, what happened? Like what happened?
Do not say that dirty word.
And I'm like, well, I'm allowed to like have that or like feel like that's what happened, and it doesn't have to be this like severe thing for us to say like, you know what, that impacted me in a lot of unconscious ways, and I'm just now realizing how that did impact me, so oh my gosh, there's so much juice here, and I just want to say thank you so much again for coming. And where can listeners find you if they want to learn more, and if they want to work together with you, and if they want to follow your journey? Oh my God.
Yeah, they can go to our website, realtalkrelationships.com, or follow us on Instagram. How do you say it? Underscore?
It's real underscore relationships underscore, or no, I
real.
messed it up, man. You try.
All right. Real underscore talk underscore relationships. The end. Yeah. And thank you so much, Jen, for having us.
Yeah, it's been great connecting and chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Of course. We'll see you guys.